Hello and welcome back to Stu Structures. We're here to continue our build on the Beanery building with this video number 8 in the series. So stay tuned. So in continuing on with the Beanery build, what we're going to do now is jump back to this original building and start doing some trim work and stuff on this building. There's a lot of woodwork around the top right underneath the eave of where the roof would be. I want to figure out the new roof line, go ahead and raise this one window that we're a couple bricks shy of height in to allow the roof to pitch the way we need to. And we'll go more into detail on that, on how I'm going to do that to overcome some of the issues that I created with this window, like I spoke of in another video. And I don't know, I'm not sure, I haven't really picked out my paint. Maybe as we go through this building, if I can find the proper color of paint, we'll go ahead and start getting this section of the building painted as well. Railroads, if you're building buildings, railroads have particular colors that they use. And the B&O Railroad down through time changed their collar a couple of different times. Now the area that we're modeling in would have had a specific type of buff and trim collars that I'm not sure really made it to this building during the time period that we are going to be modeling. Prior to that, their main collar was an Indian red on their buildings. And while it was really more or less a kind of dilapidated collar on this building and really aged and weathered at that point, I believe it was still in those collars during the time that we actually model. So I'm going to look around for that, which gives us the ability to do little weathering and paint tricks on it as well as we go through and do this. But anyway, we'll pick some directions and start getting into all that and see where we end up. Here's a photograph of what I'm going to do is start working on the wood trim in this photo on the first building that we build up around the roof line and the cornice area. There's another picture coming up that shows the detail a little bit better. I'm going to have to use several different pieces of wood to build this up. And I want to make the roof removable, so I had to come up with a way to build and layer all this up and show it. So what I'm going to do is, on the right you can kind of see the brick wall and the angle roof that comes down to that, and then all this cornice work on the outside is going to be made up of various layers of wood, and it's going to be glued directly to the brick front. And basically this forms a gutter up on top, so there's a space between the metal roof that comes down and all this cornice work around the outside, and then there's gutters that come down through the wood along several places of the building to drain the gutter area. And I think that'll give us a good way to do this. Plus I can make the roof self-supporting on the inside of the brick wall, so that I can remove the brick to do buildings or interiors or something on the inside of the building if I need to get in there and work later on or anything like that as well. So that should work rather well. I know a lot of times I talk about saving all your scraps. I've been doing this for a long time. So to find the wood pieces for this, I'm just going to start through all my scrap boxes and see if I can find some pieces that'll work. I found a couple pieces that are the thickness, I think, to cut out the two bigger pieces of wood, and then just going back through my boxes here and finding all the thinner material for the real small pieces, because there's two on the bottom and two on the top that are glued onto the bigger pieces. So here's the two thicker pieces that I can use to cut all the big boards out of, and then the two small pieces here, and I'm going to end up supplementing these with some others just to get some more length out of some of the small pieces so I don't have to piece pieces together to do this. But anyway, I just always go to my scrap box. And here, I don't know if you could see the top part of the gutter. I didn't show this picture earlier, but this shows where the wood trim comes up from that cornice, and there's kind of a slight gutter between it and where the metal roof comes down to it. So that kind of gives you an idea of the top. And I start off by cutting the big pieces here first. I'm going to do the small ones and then the wide ones, and I'm just coming through and marking my dimensions. I didn't blow the pictures up and get an actual dimension on this lumber. I held the wood up to the building and kind of just guesstimated at what I wanted to be and took a measurement and came back and marked the wood, and then I'm just coming back and cutting this narrow heavy board to as one of the two pieces that will go around each side of the three sides of this building. So, and this is basswood. I have bass and balsa wood in my junk boxes as well as new lumber as well, but I always try to use the old lumber first. So it takes several scribes with a knife to actually get down through the boards to the point that I get a good cut on them. And just always using a real sharp knife. If you don't use a sharp knife, what happens is the wood can flex a little underneath when you're cutting, and you'll get slightly wider or narrower boards. So here I'm just going back, and I want to, now that I've got pieces cut, I want to kind of just put them in place and make sure that my thinking is right on the sizes. And I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm going to come back and start cutting all the real narrow boards. And now that I have the big boards and the sizes of those, I really can get a good estimate on what sizes I want the small boards to be in proportion to those boards to make it look like the original building. And these smaller pieces are balsa wood and not basswood. I didn't have anything real thin in basswood, so I'm just using balsa wood for this. And there's two small pieces on the bottom and two small pieces on the top. So I'm just coming back and cutting all those and getting those ready so I can start gluing the assemblies together. And here's just several of the pieces laying in place so I can get a better idea. I like test fitting things many times. It saves a whole lot of problems if you just keep coming back and double checking yourself before you do anything final. And here's just Titebond wood glue, Titebond 3 wood glue. I use this for my projects. You could use Elmer's or any other types of wood glues, but I just like the Titebond. I think it's a slightly better quality wood. And I just put some on the corner of the scrap piece of paper here and put it on my finger and just run my finger down the edge, and I can control that way the amount of glue, and I just put a real fine amount right along the edge of the wood. And then I grab my other piece and put it in place and just work it to where the back edge where the two boards meet the brick structure are flush. And then once I get them glued, I put all these little clamps on them and just let them set up for a little while to so all of it gets glued in place. And once that's done, I come back and start working with the smaller boards as well, and just basically the same process, but just and gluing each one on individually, and then coming back and clamping them. And then letting each one dry before I go back and do the next one. And wood glue dries and sets up a little bit quicker than some of the other glues that I made that melt the plastic. The plastic glues, when you put them on, kind of soften the plastic, and it gets a good bond initially, but it really takes a little longer to totally cure. And once that second strip is on the top of our cornice assembly here, I come back and there's a second strip that goes on top of that sits out just a little bit farther than the first strip, and each of these kind of stair step out from the big board that was underneath of them. So I'm coming back and adding that second board on, and I'm going to clamp that and let that glue as well. The other two small boards that are underneath the cornice on the wall, it's almost impossible to glue them to the assembly beforehand. So what I'm going to do is get this whole assembly cut and mounted onto the building. And here you can see me just laying it in place just to double check myself once again. But anyway, once these are cut and on the building in place, then I'll come back and add the two smaller boards to the bottom of the assembly directly onto the wall. And it just would be a whole lot easier of a process than trying to glue them to the bottom of this other board. But I'm liking where this is headed. So the next thing to do is to prepare these so we can mount them to the wall. I'm going to cut the one end really square because I want it to fit up into that corner next to the tower building really nice and tight. When I measured these also, I measured them in such a manner that they came short of just that short span of brick that sticks out from the first building on the tower wall. I didn't want that to protrude out past that point, so it will not. But getting the square corner on this is absolutely essential. And since there is basswood in this, the X-Acto could be used to trim the two balsa wood parts, but I'm using this little saw here to cut through the basswood. It'll give me a much cleaner cut, and I'm back dragging the cuts on these because it'll cut cleaner than a forward cut as well, and it gives less debris on the wood that I have to come back here and sand down to a square finish. And you may also have to use your X-Acto a little just to clean up the edge, because you want it to be nice and clean where it meets right here next to this building. You don't want any debris sticking out or anything odd looking right there. So once I hold that into place here, I need to come back and cut and mark it for the length of the building. I don't trust just measuring and cutting. I actually put the piece in place and use a pencil here to mark the very edge of the brick, because I want that 45 degree that I'm going to cut on this to come exactly to the corner, not just shy of and not beyond, because when I put the other piece in place, I want it to meet really tight on that end. So now I'm just coming back with this small clear triangle here and marking the 45 from that line that I put on the brick side to the top side where this 45 angle will cut out onto the wood. And it just needs to be really precise. You can overcut a little and then work with it and sand it down to where you need to be, but definitely do not try to get it exact and then end up with an undercut, because there's no way you can use a board stretcher to stretch this wood to get it to work if you didn't get it quite right. And then I'm just coming back and cutting these. I did cut the balsa wood first here with the X-Acto knife, and then came back for the other two pieces of basswood, the thicker pieces, and used this saw once again. And when I got it really down nice and close, I did use the X-Acto to get it finished. I came back here and cleaned up some of the extra debris off the end a little bit, and checked it against the wall to make sure it wasn't too short. And I'm just coming back here and doing a little sanding. I want the end to be nice and smooth, so when I get both sides on and I put this end piece on the wall, it has a nice flat, even, smooth surface for the next piece to butt up to, so I can get a tight joint on it. And then I came back and just clamped these. I had to use a couple of pieces of wood as buffers in there to get these clamped. And I don't know if you saw, there was a real brief clip there, but I used just an old-fashioned tester's model cement here to glue these. Over the years I have found that it's one of the best glues out there for gluing plastic to wood. It doesn't get brittle, and you don't have to worry about it falling apart later in life. Normally if you try to get this wood off once it's adhered to the plastic, you actually leave little pieces of wood behind, because this particular glue does penetrate the wood a little, as soften the plastic and weld to the plastic itself too. So it's one of the better glues for two different materials like this in particular, the wood to the styrene. So here I just put a little run down through the wood on with the tube, then I come back with my finger and glue it, smooth it into place, because I don't want any big bulbs of the glue to squish out and leave you know, big bulbs of glue out on the plastic or anything. And here I am just mounting it to the edge and putting some little pieces of wood in there, so I can get a good clamp with my clamps. It just wouldn't clamp really good otherwise, and wanted to hold it at an angle, so I just put a couple little buffers of some pieces of balsa wood in there so the clamps could have a nice even surface to clamp to, and then clamp it on and continue with the other side. The other side I had to add a third clamp to, as you can see, just to get it to hold really well.
But this is looking really good at this point. I think once I get the end piece cut, which will be a little trickier, it'll be good. Now with the clamps off, you can see the two sides in place. We're going to start working on this end piece where I'm pointing out here with the two 45s on either side to come out and meet the 45s that we cut on the other end pieces. So started off just by cutting one 45 on one end as a starting place, and once I put that up here, I can see it needs just, well, a little bit of sanding to get it to come real square with the other piece, and so there's no cracks or gaps in between it, and clean up the wood a little bit. I want a nice tight gap, at least as tight as I can get. I'm probably going to have to play with it anyway, but it'll help me get this all in place. And then I come back and mark the other side for the other 45 on the other end. I put a straight mark next to the wall, and then come back with this triangle here and mark out the 45-degree angle so I know I've got the proper angle on it. And then I just move it down and go into the cutting, and basically I hold it up to the wall and check it. I usually cut them just a little bit long because it's easier to sand it down to fit than to have it too short and not be able to have enough wood there. So I go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, just making sure I get it to the exact size that I need. And here it is glued into place. You can see there's just a little excess wood sticking here and there, but with an X-Acto I can come back and clean that up. And any of the small open areas that I've got, this green putty, I'll just use it to come back and fill the areas and sand it down so that there's a nice smooth surface there with no open air gaps or anything in it. So once I get paint on it, it'll look like a really nice cornice piece wrapping the whole end. And that basically puts that in place. So the next thing to do is to come back and add those two small trim pieces to the bottom side now that the whole top part of it's done. So I'm going to start out with this wood piece here as the first piece. I'm going to use the same Testors glue that I used to hold the other wood in place, and get it down there really good and add that wood piece onto that. What I did was just put little tiny droplets along the edge. And then the other little wood pieces that I put to cover that, just I didn't like them, so I came back with this styrene real small square piece here to use for the other two little trim pieces instead of the wood that I had cut. So I'm putting one of those underneath the bottom wood piece where it meets the styrene brick wall. And I just put a little bit of glue down there, and then I use my knife to kind of snug it into place. And then we'll cut everything off once we get everything on. And I also added between the two big boards up at the top, it just looked kind of bland compared to the rest of the wall, so I went ahead and added another strip to that area as well. So I'm actually putting two pieces of styrene trim on either side in addition to what we already had, plus the wood bottom board down there. And I do both sides and get both the sides done. Here you can see those trim pieces in place. I haven't trimmed everything off out for the length yet, but the trim pieces are in place. And once I cut those off, I come back and do the same thing to the end walls and overlap the wood at the corners. And it just gives everything a nice, really clean look to that. And the cornice basically is finished at the end wall. And here I just put that mirror wall up and the other wall in place, and just kind of doing a pan shot of that whole building. I haven't connected the two back walls to this structure yet because I want to work on them before I do that. But here you kind of start to get a sense of the size of the building. Of course, we got the two hotel walls to add on to that.
Okay, so I was wanting to do a little more on this building in this video, but I like to keep my videos 15 minutes or just slightly longer than that, and we're getting into some time here, so I think I'm going to call it quits at this point. I've accomplished a good bit. I actually started doing a few other odds and ends while glue was drying towards the next video as well, and we'll get into some other aspects of this building that are a little different than things we've been doing. But it's nice to get all that cornice on that first building. It is slightly different from the original buildings, but it's really close, and I like the way it looks. I think once we get paint on it and cover up all the wood filler and, you know, the white plastic versus the wood and all that. I think it's going to look really nice, and when the other roof from up on top comes down and overlaps that brick edge and creates that gutter in there, I think it's going to be really nice. I did go ahead and cut the 2-story or the 3-story window in the tower out 2 bricks higher, so that's accomplished. I guess there at the end you saw when I panned the building it was setting, we did go ahead and finish the mirror wall of the one that we filmed in the segment, the earlier segment, so that other wall is built. And if we had some roofs on all that, it would already look like quite a large building. And we've still got 2 large hotel 3-story buildings to add on to the back side of that with a bridge and walkway in between them. So we got a ways to go, but it's coming together, and I'm really excited for it. I feel good about the building so far. I think everything is coming together without a lot of problems, so it's working out really well. In any case, thank you for joining me again. I do appreciate you coming back and watching my videos. Like and share these so other people out there can learn how to build their own buildings from scratch. And subscribe to the channel so every time a video comes out you'll be notified and you can watch the video and keep up with the series. I do throw some other odds and ends in too. We've got one coming up before long on a I guess the Rappahannock Railroad Museum, which I've did a video on previously. They've expanded and done several things there with the museum, and I'm excited about that. I've been helping them do some things once a month when I'm down there doing some work in the area, and I'd like to go ahead and show you guys the upgrades to the museum and some things that they've got going on. So we're going to do a video on that here in the next few weeks as well. So anyway, thank you again for coming back and sharing my video here on Stu Structures, and happy model railroading.